Hi, everybody. It's great to talk to you. I'm Paul Groth from Elsevier Labs. And Elsevier, you might know, is one of the largest scientific publishers in the world. I think we publish around 18% of all of the world's scientific literature. We also have a big books publishing business. And we also have a lot of digital products, taking that content, making it available to other people. I was going to be very quick and talk to you about what we're thinking about as compositional content today, and really how we can use all these content assets that we have to publish in a different way, made only possible essentially by the web. So I'll give you 3 examples, and then hopefully we can start off on that conversation. So as I said, we have a lot of existing content. So this is an example of a book that we have online. You can go to our Science Direct page, you can browse through the book. And what we've discovered with our books is there's a lot of interesting content that users are looking for. But it's very hard to get access to that content. They don't even know it's available. And we have essentially kind of the traffic to our books isn't as much as we'd like. So what we've been doing is building what we call topic pages. So these are pages that are automatically constructed around important topics for authors and readers from our various book and a bit of our journal content. We automatically extract definitions, so you can actually go and find a quick definition of something like a cell membrane. We extract relevant other concepts that are linked to that. And we extract snippets of content directly from all these book chapters, and we present that as part of the topic page. So this is interesting, this is cool. What's really nice about these topic pages is we meet users where they are. So all these topic pages are outside of our paywall. They're made to be indexed by search engines. And what we see is our users are in something like Google Scholar, they're in just normal Google, they want some background information on cell membranes, those come up. And so this indexing of our content is made available like that. We also see readers, they're in journal articles, they want some background information. So what we're actually doing is automatically highlighting parts of the journal articles themselves with these background topic information. You can go off to the topic page, find the relevant information in the book chapter itself. And so we think this is a great way. We've seen a lot of really strong uptake of this. We have about 50% return users on these topic pages looking at more topic pages themselves. This is only possible with tech. Because of all of our content is already in XML, it's pretty easy to mine. It's pretty easy to get that information already available. We have some complex taxonomies built around these topic pages, also automatically built. So having that digitally native information has made this possible, and also really made the value of these book contents more available to our readers. Another example of this kind of compositional content is in health. I think you can see it over here and over here. What we discovered is that our health consumers, our doctors, are very interested in things like dosage forms or decision trees that help them navigate a particular area. So for example, a patient comes in, they're like, oh, I'm 35 years old, I have a headache, what should I do? And we actually have thousands and thousands of these decision trees and these drug dosage forms also in books and in other guideline content that we publish. The problem is surfacing that. So this is an example where we've used deep learning to actually go and classify all these decision trees, these drug dosage forms, been able to assign those to a topic itself, so that when you do a search in our clinical key product, that surfaces again. again, here I'm talking about taking these snippets of information that are buried in this long-form content and delivering it to the reader itself. So I'll give you one more. I was going fast, so I'll give you one more example. So one of the things that you heard yesterday from Martin is about the kind of move towards disaggregating journal articles. So this is a journal article about depression, so about antidepressants, and it's gotten a lot of traffic on the web. So these are the alt metrics for this article. It's about whether or not these kinds of antidepressants are actually effective. And what's interesting about being on the web is that we know right away what articles are really popular. We can also do things like move the paywall based upon whether we're getting a lot of traction around particular articles. We can also resort our front pages of our major brands, so something like the Lancet or Cell, we can change depending on the kind of alt metric traffic that we're getting. Now, what we really like about this particular article, this is an open access article, is that they also published their data. So this is a completely separate kind of publishing. It's not just publishing a PDF or a web page, but actually publishing separate data. So this is Mendeley data. We have an associated article, right? So this is the side of the article that has a data set itself. This is on Mendeley data. This is a data repository that we run. You can go grab the data itself, download it, redo the analysis itself. And this is a different, completely different kind of publishing. We're not publishing text. We're just really publishing things like CSV files, publishing images, but we're giving you the same kinds of metadata that scholarly authors have really come to expect. So for example, you get a separate digital object identifier or separate identifier for the data itself. You get the author metadata associated with it. So what we see in scholarly publication is really this bursting of the kind of monolithic idea of an article or a book, breaking out into these compositional forms, and then being able to reconstitute them in different ways, whether it be in terms of topic pages, whether it be in terms of something we present on the web, or something we present in mobile. So kind of to wrap up, I just wanted to give you some examples of what we are doing in terms of breaking apart the article, presenting them in different ways. We have a very valuable existing content base, and I think a lot of other publishers do as well, but it's really hard to unlock that value. And one way of doing that is thinking about what are the parts of the individual content that you have that you can expose, that you can make available on the web, and thinking in this kind of web native way. A big issue for us is how can we use existing publishing workflows to bootstrap these new products. So I gave you that example of that Lancet article. An interesting thing there is that we've been able to bootstrap this Mendeley data product by connecting to our submissions system. So as you submit to Elsevier, we actually give you a prompt, hey, instead of putting that supplementary data buried in the article, upload it into Mendeley data, you'll get a DOI, you'll be able to have this extra asset. So thinking about how you can change your normal publishing processes in order to create these kind of new products, I think is an interesting direction we've been thinking about, and something I think other publishers could benefit as well. We've also been doing, developing new content assets and authoring specific for the digital. I didn't really go and give you examples here, but I think this is something also to think about. We have examples of actually just publishing software articles. So articles just about software itself. Very small articles, actually importing GitHub repositories and then having authors describe that GitHub repository. So again, thinking about what the web enables in terms of authorship and these kind of composable or small pieces of content that are very useful for readers on the web. Thanks.
Thank you.
So my name is Jérémie Roche, and I work at Cairn, cairn.info, and what I thought I would do today is give you sort of a case study of what academic publishers in the fields of social sciences and humanities have done to sort of embrace digital technologies and move to web-based publishing. So Cairn.info is an online platform that was founded 13 years ago now by a group of Francophone academic publishers in social sciences and humanities, one Belgian publisher and 3 French publishers. And Cairn was actually, the project was started by a researcher at the University of Liège who conducted research on behalf of a Belgian publisher, and that was sort of in the late 90s, to try and understand how publishers, French language publishers, could embrace the web. And when he presented his conclusions, well, they realized that they had a business case, and that's how, together with other publishers and a combination of public and private actors, launched the project. Initially, the goal was for the publishers to offer digital versions of their journals, but that's now been expanded to also offer digital versions of books, and that goes from monographs to pocket encyclopedias, collaborative works, etc. So there's quite a large number of publishers, publishing structures involved, about 150. And on Cairn, you'll find around 480 journals and close to 10,000 ebooks. And when I talk about humanities and social sciences, you have to also consider that it's quite a broad field. And on Cairn, you'll find publications that range from peer-reviewed journals in economics to what we call in France general interest journals that are sort of on the border between academic and sort of popular science publications. The way the offer is structured, we work primarily with higher education and research institutions, university libraries, and these customers offer their users access to the platform through a site license. So we're really a B2B company, even though the focus is the end user. And we're fortunate to be really a key resource in the Francophone world. Most university libraries in the Francophone world, Belgium, Switzerland, France, Quebec, Francophone Africa, use Cairn extensively. In the rest of the world, in the non-French speaking world, Cairn is more of a niche resource. And if I had to give you the one goal of Cairn, it's to ensure the visibility, the accessibility, and the discoverability of the publications that are available on the platform. And we do that through different means. It's, of course, taking full advantage of modern digital and web technologies. It's maximizing the publication's exposure thanks to the metadata. And then it's also using the content that's on the platform in different ways to provide context and editorialize content and essentially create new products. And really, in one sentence, Cairn.info adds value to the publications, to the benefit of the publishers, and to the end users. And one thing to consider, and I'm going to talk now about the way, a couple of the technical choices that were made for the platform. One thing to consider is that, as I said, we're a B2B company, and it's for us you have to understand that university libraries will choose to renew their subscription to the platform on the basis of the usage of the content by the students, by the researchers. So we're in a very different world than B2C publishers, trade publishers that want to sell novels to end users and have more of a desire to protect their content and protect against piracy. For Cairn, it's the opposite. The more the content is visible, the more the content is accessible, the more successful we will be. So on this basis, I'll tell you a little bit about the way the platform is organized and the choices that were made. Journal issues, ebooks, journal collections on Cairn are deconstructed, and this is similar to what Paul explained, that we try and deconstruct the publications into individual articles, individual chapters. All the publications are in structured XML, and we use a DTD called Érudit, which is a DTD that was, I think, inspired by the Library of Congress DTD and adapted to Francophone social sciences and humanities publications. And the reason why we chose this very sort of open, format is that the audience are researchers, are students, and they're interested in, and I think I'm borrowing the term from somebody's presentation yesterday, they're interested in accessing an ecosystem. They're not interested in accessing a specific title. When they go onto the platform, they're interested in seeing everything that's published in their field of interest. They want to be able to go from one article into an ebook chapter, go to an author page, see all the other publications by that author, etc. Which is one of the things that you can do with XML. You can cross-link between items, so between individual articles, between authors, citations, notes, etc. Another advantage of XML is that you'll have very structured content. So the publications are already broken down into individual items, and within those items with XML, you can really break it down into what each item is within that article, header, subheader, paragraph, introduction, notes, citation, etc. And that's important because when you're doing full text search on the content, that's how you can sort of configure the algorithm to calculate the relevance of a term if you know that it's, for example, featured in the header or in the title of the article or in the body of an article, as opposed to if it's at the end of a citation or at the end of a note. On Cairn, you'll have you'll have a common structure for all types of publications. So from a technical point of view, we don't make a distinction between journals, journal articles, ebooks chapters. It's all the same, again, to facilitate sort of going back and forth between the publications within this ecosystem. And finally, the advantage of XML is that content can be displayed on different interfaces and on different devices. It doesn't really matter what browser or how the user is accessing the platform. And then here I guess we can talk about two sort of usage cases, because on Cairn a user can choose between browsing, streaming the articles on the platform in HTML, and that's sort of in line with what I explained earlier, the idea that the users want to access this ecosystem. They want to quickly navigate from one type of content to another, etc. But we also give users the option to print articles or to download articles, and that's for sort of more immersive, really in-depth reading of content, which is more in line with what we observe our users want. And beyond that, in terms of measuring usage, or understanding user behavior, well, the key metric for academic publications are the counter reports that basically tell you for every journal there were that many article or full text downloads per month. But because Cairn is a full XML web platform, we can go way beyond that and really delve into sort of web analytics to understand user behavior, user preferences, how long they stay on a page, where they click, and really build a user profile to make recommendations for that user, for like similar articles or other users found these articles interesting, etc. And then the benefit for publisher is actually if you start from the XML, is that you can then, well, use the XML to produce all sorts of other files, including EPUB for dissemination on other platforms or on a B2C model. So that's the first. There's a quick overview of the technology and the choices that were made and the reasoning behind them. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is, well, the importance of the metadata and the importance of making the publications visible to the rest of the world. So, and I would actually argue that in scholarly publishing, the publication itself and the metadata are equally important, and that the visibility and discoverability of a publication will depend on the quality of the metadata. And so what we do is work with a number of actors all over the web to make sure that the publications on Cairn are visible and accessible. In Google and Google Scholar, in Google, if you type the name of a journal in Google, the first hit will always be the journal on Cairn, and also in academic indexes that have this sort of quality validation process. I'm talking about Scopus or Web of Science. And then we also share the metadata with all major library software vendors, and they are the software vendors that provide university libraries sort of their key infrastructure from the ILS, the Integrated Library System, which is the catalog, to the link resolvers, discovery tools, so basically the library's own Google. And it's very important to have our metadata shared with these vendors so that it appears in the indexes and it can be found by the users. Because if students don't find the content easily, they won't access it. They'll just go elsewhere on the web and not to resources provided by the library. And then finally, the last thing that we try and do is to bridge the gap between linguistic areas, and that a lot of it is done through translations and providing context to the publications available on Cairn, because they're all available in French. And so having the publications already deconstructed into individual articles makes it easier to work on the content and build new contents. So an example that I can mention is the international edition of Cairn, which is a separate platform from the main platform that's entirely in English, where you'll find translated abstracts, translated metadata, and translated articles as well. Which means that for a researcher in any field who speaks no French, it is now possible to go to an English platform, search in English, identify articles, identify publications available in English, and know what's being published in the Francophone world in his or her field of interest. But that's still really sticking to the format of the journal, the article. Another thing that we do, and that's going further into this deconstructing the journal, is what we call the dossiers, which are monthly publications that provide a journalistic perspective on key topics in Francophone academic publishing. So essentially, a journalist will write a piece on a different subject every month, drawing from articles that he'll find on Cairn. These articles are translated into English and made available for free, of course. But if you think about it, it's yet another way to make the content, make publications from the Francophone world accessible, understandable by a broader audience. So I think that these are the examples that I wanted to give you. If you had to remember one thing from my talk, I guess it would be that for us, increasing the visibility and providing context to the publications of publishers in social sciences and humanities in the Francophone world will ultimately increase the interest for their publications and will increase usage of the content. So yeah, I said that our goal was to add value to the publications for the publishers, for the end users, We've built an ecosystem where people can go and really immerse themselves into the world of Francophone publishing in the social sciences and humanities. We make publications as visible and accessible to everyone, and we provide context and reconstruct new publications on the basis of what we've got on the platform. Thank you.
I want to talk about scholarly publishing on the internet, and getting scholarly publishing into the web. And I want to, first of all, just categorize that a little bit by saying that the web at this moment is still elusive to publishing. Tim O'Reilly, who many of you will know, just recently joined our advisory board. We had our first meeting with him, and he asked us, like Kristen Breton and myself. Kristen is the co-founder of Coko, the Collaborative Knowledge Foundation, which is who I'm representing today. And he asked us, what is the big surprise innovation for publishing in 2018? And, you know, he's a big Silicon Valley guy thinking about, you know, these wild futures. And we had to say to him, well, the big surprise innovation for publishing in 2018 is the web. It still hasn't happened for publishing, and that's the big problem. Having an article store, which is a web display area, is not what we mean by web publishing, right? That if you didn't do that, there would be something very, very wrong. What we mean by web publishing is that you have to actually get the workflow and the content into the web from the very beginning, right? And the problem here is that we're still treating articles as post-digital artifacts, right? So they're paper-like artifacts. The Microsoft Word being, I think, the container for 90% of the articles that are submitted to journals is a post-paper digital medium. It is not actually, in my opinion, a web-native format. So that's the first problem. The other problem is that because of this, that is the starting point, that we're using these, building these systems, or they have been built in the last 15 years and they haven't changed much because there's no need to, is essentially just workflow trackers that deal with the content as an attachment, right? So you just attach it, the content to an email, you send it around to your reviewers. In the case of journal article workflows, you track where it is through a data store, editorial manager, or whatever it is. And you know, you try and keep up with it as much as possible. You process it through an arbitrary workflow, and then at the end of the day, you have a reviewed article. Then the next problem is that you then take that post-paper digital artifact, the Microsoft Word file, and what do you do with it? You convert it to more post-paper digital artifacts, PDF, and also into XML, right? And then, of course, HTML. And the only way that you can do that, because you're in a bad place to start with, is to throw it over the wall to an external vendor and ask them to make these conversions for you. So you lose the ability to control a single source of truth. You've got multiple sources of truth in your content store, in your article. And also, it takes a long time to process these documents, and it's expensive, and it's often cost prohibitive to very small journals, and it's strangling the publishing industry. And one of the reasons why the publishing industry, because the publishers feel this pain, right? It's a very apparent pain. It's a very expensive apparent pain. And publishers pay for this because they're using tools that are supporting these workflows, these legacy workflows, and these tools don't have any need to change. There's no pressure onto them to change. And also, for a publisher to be able to move on, they actually have to replace their entire workflow system. But not only that, it has consequences for their staffing, because workflow in publishing at this moment is a combination of two things: bad workflow systems. It's even slightly a crime to call them workflow systems. They're basically workflow tracking systems. And to make up for the deficiencies of these systems, which pass around post-paper digital artifacts, you actually have to staff your organization with people to make up for what the software doesn't do, right? So if you want to change and become a web-based publisher, either you have to start from zero, you know, and just discard everything and tally-ho, or you actually have to not just change the way how you do things, you have to change your entire organization. And that's the horrible reality of the situation that we're in today. So what we need to do is we need to start developing some of the key things that will enable us to get out of this paradigm and into the web. And there are essentially three key things that are wrong at this day, that are missing at this day, that we need to put in place as the foundations for moving into web-based publishing. The first one is, how do we get content out of post-paper digital artifacts like Word into web-native content, right? And the only web-native content that I'm aware of is HTML. How do we get Word files into HTML? It's a simple mechanical question, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is, how do we edit the content once it's in HTML, right? And that's actually also an interesting problem because it's a very mechanical thing, but scholarly content needs a lot of stuff that current editors don't supply, right? So these tools are missing, right? It's very hard to find an editor. Google Docs doesn't cut it. A web-based editor that allow you to manage citations and notes and all these kinds of things that you need to manage, and allow you also to look to the future of what else the web may bring to your articles. But these formats, these tools are missing, and those that exist are proprietary so that we have no control over them, and we have no ability to extend them. So that's the second problem. And the last problem is, once you've got the content into the web, once you can change it into the web, in the web, how do you get it out of the web? Because there's still a legacy requirement, unfortunately, for PDF and XML and these other formats, right? So essentially, the only problems that we face is how to get content out of the digital post-paper digital containers. How do we change it within the web, and then how do we get it out of the web? In other words, the problem is absolutely everything across the entire stack. And so we have to face this. So we really want to talk about web-based publishing. We can't talk about just an end-of-line delivery system. That's not digital publishing. That's not web-based publishing. That is leveraging a network to deliver content. It's not the same thing. So as an industry, what we're doing what we have to do is embrace this new way of working and find our way to it. And the only way to do that, in my opinion, is to invest in open infrastructure, build on open source tools, and build on web standards, right? As long as we keep turning our back to web standards and to the web, and we keep using things like Microsoft Word, we're never going to be able to embrace 90% of what is possible with web publishing. So if I can show you just a few things here, I want to just very quickly show you a couple of things that we're working on. Very first is X Suite. X Suite is a suite of XSLT scripts, right, which allow you to transform Microsoft Word content into HTML. And it's giving us the kind of granularity. It's been built with the University of California Press and California Digital Library as their first clients. And it's built with the granularity that you require as a book publisher to get content out of Word into HTML. And you'd think that these tools would already exist, right? XSLT's been around for a long time. There are plenty of ways, plenty of people who have tried this before. The big problem is there's not community that has been built around these tools, right? There's very little documentation, there's arbitrary approaches to it, which don't have a sort of a strong philosophical understanding of what they're trying to achieve. And they've failed to build community, and there's relatively little documentation around the tools as well. So we've decided to go back to the beginning with this, and we've built this tool called X Suite. 1.0 was released last week, and it does a very good job of taking the content from docx into HTML, and also inferring, using a number of really smart methods, some of the structure. So the point being is that you can go from Word, if you've ever looked at document XML, which is a Word file is basically a zip file. If you unzip it, you can actually see the XML. It's disgusting. It's very hard for a human or a machine to understand it. So we first of all give it an accurate representation within very simple HTML, which actually means that you have a very good starting place for parsing that as a machine. It's a very good readable, human readable format at the same time as well. But not only that, we infer structure when we do it, because we have a better starting point than if we were to work on the original Word file. So this is the first thing we're trying to do to solve one of these problems. The second thing that we're trying to do is we're building web-based editors let me see if I can find it for you. Web-based editors, so that, which have the sort of control that you require. Oh, that's right, this is where it is. Yeah, that you require as a publisher when you're working on content, right? So the big problem is that the web-based editors that exist today are essentially text editors. They're not word processors. And there's quite a difference between the two. So what you need out of in many publishing workflows, what you need out of an editor are things like, unfortunately, track changes, right? Track changes is one of these things that we would all probably like to do away with, but they are an integral part to many publishing workflows, and I'm thinking more strongly about the book production workflows than the journal workflows here. But the problem is that there haven't been until recently the robust editors that are word processors in the web that are open source that you can customize to meet your specific use case, right? You can't just use Google Docs, it's not good enough. You can't get clean enough content out of it. It doesn't give you enough control over all the things that you'd like to do, like figure references and all this kind of stuff. So we need to start building and investing in shared infrastructure like these kinds of tools and talking about the use cases and the needs that we each have and together building them into a shared tool set. So this is an editor that we've built that does exactly this. It has absolute control over the back-end tagging source so that you can use it. You can do all sorts of markup. You can do notes, add notes and footnotes. You can manage track changes, figures, the whole works, diacritics, whatever you like. It also has commenting. And at the end of the day, while you can work on an article amongst the team collaboratively, the source that comes out of it, the final HTML source, is very, very clean. And that's another thing that web processors, word processors do over text editors. Basic text editors that you find in the web make a mess of the underlying HTML, right? So you need absolute control over the source. And then the last thing that we're working on to solve some of these problems, if I can go back to this, is actually getting content out of the web. So PDF is still a requirement, obviously, in books, right? If you want to produce a book and take it to print, then you need to go through PDF. There's pretty much no other way to do it. And unfortunately, in the scientific publishing world too, in the journal article world, researchers still feel that unless they have a PDF, they haven't really published, which is a strange cultural reality. So if you're talking about web-based publishing, you still need to feed into these things, right? So page-based rendering of pagination of HTML, right, into page-based content is an absolute necessity. So at pagemedia.org, which is another project that we're working on, we're building the tools to the W3 specifications for page-based media, so that you can take HTML and you can render it directly into PDF. So if I can go up here, for example, I can show you maybe an example. This hasn't yet been released, but you can just see very briefly here that this is an HTML file. Maybe I can zoom out. This is an HTML file that we've just paginated in the browser, and it looks pretty nice. This is just pure HTML. If you were to look at the pure HTML, it would just look like, you know, one long page. And we're applying the JavaScripts that allow it to paginate in the browser. You've got margin control, running headers, the whole lot. And the nice thing about this is that you can automate this so that the production of the PDF in the browser, if you print this, you'll get exactly the same pagination that you see in the PDF as you see in the browser here. So it's leading towards what we call automated typesetting, right? Where you can push a button and you can get the content that you, the one-to-one correlation of the PDF to the content that you see in the browser. And that's using the browser as essentially as a typesetting engine. And the nice thing about this is it's kind of a polyfill, so you can extend it and build modules to W3C specifications so that you can prove out various speculative specifications. Yeah, so that's essentially what I wanted to say. We still basically have the problem that that scholarly publishing is never going to be able to call itself web-based publishing, until it gets out of the idea that it's okay to just pass around content in these proprietary buckets as attachments through workflow systems which you don't control, you can't change, you don't own, and you're passing them through as attachments where Word and email are actually the tools of the day. That's not web page publishing. Just because at the end of the day you push it out to a web-based interface is not enough. If you want to talk about web-based scholarly publishing, in my opinion, we have to get out of Word as soon as possible, and there are very basic mechanical problems that need to be addressed in order for us to get there, and I think these are 3 of the key things that we have to address. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Works? Works. Question time. Makoto, is there a...
Thank you. I have one question about change tracking. Well, I'm now wearing my hat as the convener of SC34WG4, which is maintaining OOXML. Change tracking is a very difficult issue. If you see the OXML specification, there are a number of ugly elements for recording change tracking. And if you see ODF, it has only a couple of elements. So it might look nice, but it doesn't work in an interoperable manner. So this is just a very difficult topic in this area. And I'm curious to know what is your markup or how you represent change tracking in your system.
Thank you. It's a very good question. It is a terribly difficult problem to solve, but we've done pretty well, actually. And the way that we deal with it is that the data of the article is basically just represented as a flat data. And we deal with any changes in the documents as an annotation, right? And so we map that annotation onto the flat data structure. And so this allows us to do a lot of trickery, and this is where JavaScript and CSS really come into play. Using those 2 tools, we can actually do a lot of very interesting manipulations of how you represent a change, which is, I don't know. Yeah, that's how we approach it. And I think you should try it and see how we go. I think we've got track changes down to being able to see who's made a change, multiple overlapping changes we can deal with. We can do multiple selections and accept and rejects. We can hide and show the changes. We can do track changes on the notes. We can do track changes on images, on note callouts, and it's working pretty well. We've designed it with the University of California Press, and so we're designing it from a user's perspective of what are the things that they require on the top 10 things for track changes and how would it work for them, and so far they seem pretty satisfied. Yeah.
Are there any documentations about that?
No, but I'm very happy to walk you through it and show you, and all the sources open source and available online.
Yeah, hi, I'm Martin Kretke from LE-Tech, and yeah, thanks for your presentation. The tools looked really neat, and we are also working in the scholarly publishing field, and I wonder, how do you address issues like handling tables or handling equations and this complex stuff like this, because in most presentations of editors or tools, these are features that aren't implemented, or there just exist commercial tools for that. And so I wonder, how did you address these things, or did you work on it, or so? Yeah.
Right. So tables we have passed out through the XLT, the X Suite, and they look pretty good. Math is not yet addressed, although I've addressed it in a previous project that I worked in, because there's a number of problems you have to deal with. First of all, Word does not use standardized MathML, and then they also often use math type binaries and things like this. And there are interesting tools available that backwards engineer those binaries back to MathML. So you actually need a suite of tools to deal with math. So that's currently an issue that's ahead of us. We've addressed part of it in previous projects, and we'll be rolling that out in the next 6 months or so in this current project. In terms of the editing within the editor, we can import tables, but we can't yet edit it, and that's because we're about to do a migration to another editor framework. We're migrating out of Substance into ProseMirror, and ProseMirror has some more sophisticated abilities for management of these kind of issues and a bigger community. So one of the things I'd say in terms of solving these problems, it's not just about technology, but it is about community. You have to go where the community is, and you have to be prepared to put in, and so that's what we're most interested in now.
My name is Martin Klopstock. I represent a business publisher in London. We've been wrestling exactly with the sort of problems that you're describing, trying to get structure into documents right from the beginning and making them web-friendly. So we've developed an XHTML schema. The benefit of that is that you actually get, if you have a CSS, an EPUB at the end, and that is in some ways your validation. But the issue that you've outlined about Word being the sort of problem is, I think, our biggest obstacle, because even though we'd like to get rid of it, it is the 100% authoring tool of our entire author base, where every single publication that we get starts its life in Word. And that means it's, I think, almost impossible to wean the author base off of that as a tool. You have to get the content out of, structure it in Word and then get it out into XHTML. But I can't see at the moment an alternative to that workflow unless there are authoring tools that are web native authoring tools that you can migrate authors onto in the market. So how do you propose that shift takes place over time?
Yeah, it's going to take a long time, and I think we have to prove that this is a better way to work. That's the first thing. So we have to make our tools better than Word, and part of that, for example, is to if you can get into the web, you can start thinking about different types of article formats, which is also interesting, right? So you can integrate live data sets into. I don't know if you've seen the tool Stenciller, very interesting reproducible tool stack. Built for the web, and it allows you to, for example, provides interfaces for collaboration between coders and what the developer calls clickers. So people who work in spreadsheet manipulating data and people who work on raw files manipulating data. There's no current way for those two people to meet, to collaborate. But if you provide tools that are networked that allow the web-based rendering of a data file which is also accessible programmatically to people on the command line, then you have a nice meeting point, right? So this is not something that is possible very easily within Excel Word-based environments. Then you can also link those data sets and render them live as they get manipulated within an article. So these are the sorts of things that we have to start pushing towards. Micropublications is another one, right? You can easily start building article production interfaces for micropublications because there's a small amount of data and there's no established practice around that. So we can start forcing people into these environments, and then we can also link some of the metadata collection tools that you need for that kind of publishing to the existing databases that are out there to normalize and populate the data, blah, 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 blah. So, there's a lot of advantages that we have to show researchers about this way of working, and I think that's the only way that we will get there.
So I really believe in this collapsing of the workflow process. We're doing that as well. I think almost everybody is trying to do that, where you get the structuring very close to where you're interacting with the author. But I see two, I hate to say this, but I see one positive area where we see the potentiality of going away from standard authoring tools like Word, which is around particular Jupyter notebooks. So an environment where people are already authoring in something that's structured and a bit more web native. It's that we find really exciting. On the other hand, what we've seen especially in scholarly publication is a move towards publishing earlier before even publishing in preprint environments or putting things on the web. before they go through us, right? So we get submissions that are directly PDFs. And so I actually see a proliferation of something that's even kind of harder to work with than Word docs, which are just straight PDFs. We get submissions directly from archive. We get submissions directly from our own preprint server, SSRN. And so I wonder how you think about that process of, as we actually push people to push things on the web earlier, that what they're pushing on the web is actually a PDF.
Well, I love preprints. We did a lot of work with archive, and there's a lot of amazing stuff happening in that environment. But it's essentially a workaround because the current publishing system is what it is, right? So you would want researchers to publish stuff a lot earlier, but journals have often been historically threatened by this idea, right? Of having material get out there earlier than it's been than they have received it. So this is changing a little bit, which I think is positive, but still there's a kind of protectiveness around that journals have for this kind of process. So that's one thing. There needs to be some cultural rethink there. And the other thing is that it's still maintaining the article artifact, and I think we need to push beyond that a little bit. So I would argue that that preprints are a little bit of a workaround in a ways, and if we really want to think about sharing data earlier, we should think about things like micro-publishing, right? So when you release positive and negative results in smaller chunks a lot earlier in the research process.
Unless there are somebody, let me add something to that. Micro-publishing, and it also relates to what this guy did, deconstructing things. It sounds really good, exciting, but until the research establishment gives the same amount of recognition for those articles, or for publishing data, the other example that he has, or publishing software, until the bean counters that essentially control the career of researchers, until that changes, it will be very difficult to get it through. I know it's a chicken and egg situation, but it's very tough. And what I see in the research environment where I am in is that young researchers don't do it. Old researchers who do not care anymore, they are fine because, well, what changes? But the young researchers are the most conservative lot because they need the traditional publication for their career.
Well, I would take a little bit of an issue with that because it's not really yet an established practice. And I think one of the things that I've seen, we work with Wormbase a lot, who are standing up micro-publication systems, right? And they are working with senior researchers who teach students and coaching the students for doing micro-publications because they don't have to first have had the funding to go through an entire research cycle to produce an article, so that they can actually get to this earlier and they can start annotating, making changes, even checking results that have been published or made available through micro-publications, and start adding their name and accumulating some respect through that pathway. So I think that's very interesting, and I think we will see that evolve over time. I just think it's just not yet here.
So I think I'm a big proponent of micro-publications, actually published on micro-publication. But the interesting thing for us is not going that small, but what we find is, for example, data, once we kind of contextualize data in the metadata around it, so data citations, those kinds of things, we saw an increasingly the adoption of that, but also putting that in the kind of expected practice around it. So, oh yeah, I go through my normal article submission process. Oh, but I'm supposed to do this data over here. Oh, actually, I get a lot of value out of that. So now I will go just directly in publishing my data. So those kind of using the standard workflows, but to push people in the right direction. Or another example I think we've seen is and this is a web example, is web annotation. So the ability to annotate PDFs, but also annotate anywhere on the web using hypothesis and web annotation has also led people to start thinking of, oh, actually, I can just do annotations, and actually my annotations are my contributions. So I think that using that existing process to kind of bootstrap over into these newer forms of publications is pretty exciting.
Okay, any other question? Maybe on that side of the aisle? No? No? So on this one wins? Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I hear that it will take some more time. It reminds me of Cebol conference in the 80s, where we said it will take some time. What's still missing in this vision is, for what I understand, is semantic structure. Because Word and even HTML isn't semantically structured. HTML5 is better, but what we need to manipulate the content as data is semantic structure. So I'm still wondering how this is gathered from Word files, which is not easy, and then how is it manipulated, inscribed inside the HTML editor, and in the end, what kind of issue? The kind of issue that is left is also the issue of the hierarchy, because we can input semantics in Word, but with no hierarchy. We can do some in HTML, but the hierarchy is also difficult.
So, I mean, you can do lots of interesting structural validation through JavaScript and things like this, right? So that's quite interesting. But the nice thing about HTML is that it can have structure, right? But it can also not have structure. And a lot of people have seen that as a weakness in the past, but I think I would argue that it's a strength because it allows you to progressively add structure over time. And you can do that programmatically, or you can do that manually, right? So that's the beauty of HTML. And you can have all the structure you want with HTML. And as long as it's internal to your own system, you only have to worry about the structure when you need to go out into other systems that it conforms to a specific format, right? But you can add all the structure you want to that HTML so that it can easily be converted when it goes out into these other formats.